President Trump is calling on other countries to help secure safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Trump specifically called on China, France, the UK, and others to help. Shipping traffic has been at a virtual standstill in the strait, caused gas prices to spike. In a new interview with MS Now, Iran's foreign minister disputed the claim that the strait is closed. CNN correspondent Julia Benbrook has more.
This is a big area of focus right now, as roughly 20% of the world's oil travels through the Strait of Hormuz. And President Donald Trump has posted about this several times over the weekend. I want to pull up part of one of those posts for you now. In it, he said this: many countries, especially those who are affected by Iran's attempted closure of the Hormuz Strait, will be sending warships in conjunction with the United States of America to keep the strait open and safe. We have already destroyed 100% of Iran's military capability, but it's easy for them to send a drone or two, drop a mine, or deliver a close-range missile somewhere along or in this waterway, no matter how badly defeated they are. He added that he hopes, emphasis on hopes there, that China, France, South Korea, and the United Kingdom will be sending ships. In the meantime, he says that the United States will be bombing the shoreline. Now, in a separate post, he reiterated his calls for other countries to help secure shipping in the passage, adding that he believes this should have been a team effort all along, and now it will be. He said the United States will be helping with coordination to ensure that this is done quickly, smoothly, and well. And this comes as Americans are feeling a direct impact here, as there is a surge in gas prices. And while Trump has said he is confident those will eventually go down, this could be an attempt to ease some of those growing concerns. Iran's foreign minister has denied claims that the strait is completely closed, instead saying that they are blocking vessels with ties to the United States and Israel.
A week ago, President Trump told Keir Starmer that he didn't need help from the British, especially coming in after the U.S., in his words, had already won. Fast forward to this weekend, where he's asking for help from China, France, Japan, South Korea, the UK, others as well, to continue passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Frame the reality that is confronting the president at this stage of the war.
Sure. I think his initial comments were related to the four objectives that were laid out in terms of what the Pentagon was trying to achieve from a military perspective, because there was a question about whether or not we would need to use the British base at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean to be able to launch strategic bombers against Iran. And I think the Pentagon determined, obviously, now that it could do so without having to use that base. Now we're talking about a different mission set. So in addition to those four objectives that were laid out in terms of taking out the missiles, the missile launchers, the drones, the defense industrial base behind that, the Navy, and then potentially the nuclear program, which Cedric just spoke to in terms of what they're targeting, a new mission set has popped up, and that is the defense of the Straits of Hormuz, to allow folks to be able to transit there commercial shipping-wise, because the Iranians have now adopted a strategy of trying to apply pressure on the U.S. administration to stop the war by jacking up the price of oil, basically by making the straits virtually impossible to transit. They're physically open, but due to the threat of a potential attack, ships are not transiting at the moment. And so the U.S. is trying to build an international naval coalition, similar to what they did off the coast of Yemen when the Houthis were attacking during the last round of conflict.
Colonel, I want you to listen here to the Iranian Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi. He was on last evening. Let's watch.
I can say that the strait is not closed, but it is only closed to American, Israeli, ships and tankers, and not to others.
So he says it's open. Are countries, companies likely to test that assurance? I mean, consider President Pezeshkian said that the Iranians were sorry for attacking their Gulf neighbors, and then continued hours later to attack them, and still are. You think anybody's going to test that offer?
I don't think so, Victor. And I think, as Alex was alluding to, the basic thing is this: because the Iranians can't be trusted, shipping companies are not going to trust them. And that's the real dilemma for them here. They've got a whole bunch of ships on either side of the Strait of Hormuz, and those ships aren't moving except for very few exceptions because the Iranians are posing a threat. They probably, so far at least, have not really mined the Strait of Hormuz. Maybe in a symbolic sense, they've deployed a few mines, but they have not done so en masse, and that definitely leads to the conclusion that yes, it's physically possible to possibly transit the strait, but it's very dangerous, and there's a risk there that they're not willing to take.
Alex, what's your thought on what the president told NBC that he's not ready to make a deal to end the war? The president says that Iran wants to make a deal, but he doesn't want to, quote, because the terms aren't good enough yet. Doesn't say what those terms are, but implied here is that there are terms offered, that there are talks, that there are some offers from the Iranians. Doesn't seem like there's been anything since the talks before the opening of this war. What do you hear there from the president?
Well, I'm hearing from the president. It's what I'm hearing from mediators in the region as well, where there's been several nation states that have attempted to mediate or pass messages in between. And so that part, as you just alluded to, yes, I mean, that's pretty common at this point in the war. And this actually all aligns with strategies on both sides, to be honest with you. So, it looks like there's several weeks of strikes left to complete the military mission on the U.S. side. And it becomes a question of will. Is the will there to see the mission through and ensure that there's not a capability left inside of Iran that could strike back? And I think the president's made clear that the objectives that he's laid out are to make sure that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon or the ability to get one at the end of this, to break out, so to speak, missiles and drones and that type of thing, which is a pretty robust mission. It's a very, very big industrial base that has to be targeted in order to sort of take that out. And for the Iranians, they're acting from a position of existential threat. They believe that the regime is at threat, and so they're doing everything they can to try to ensure that this doesn't end in an unconditional surrender. They want a conditional ceasefire on their terms. So I think at this point, you almost have to see the Straits mission through and open that up and not allow the Iranians to choke it off, or that's going to become a strategic choke point and means of deterrence in the future. And that'll hold the global economy basically at risk whenever the Iranians want to. And that's something that simply can't stand.
How do you see this playing out from where we sit today?
The president doesn't yet know how to get the straits reopened. As of right now, almost all of the naval assets that the United States has in the Persian Gulf are being used to defend Gulf infrastructure, energy, desalination, and bases. And as a consequence, you can't defend the ships that are going through the straits or that are sitting there in the straits, which are right now basically sitting ducks if the Iranians choose to hit them. That's why President Trump is suddenly calling pretty urgently for every country around, including China. He's asking for other countries to send ships. And this, remember, the United States, when they launched this war, went with the Israelis. They weren't asking anyone else to be a part of it. They weren't giving anyone else a heads up. They were telling the Brits, we already won. That was just last Saturday. It's too late for you to send any ships. 1 week later, he's saying we need a global flotilla. And that is because the impact of these straits staying disrupted, with the only country that can get ships out right now, the Iranians, that is a major, major disruption that we're going to feel for months in the United States and the global economy.
And so two follow-ups to that. What is the likelihood of this actually happening, what the president is requesting, these other countries coming together to help? And are you surprised by Iran's actions, that they were willing to do it and shut down the strait?
I think that other countries are going to participate. We've certainly heard from the French. I suspect the Brits will participate. I think other countries will as well, maybe even India. How much of that will be defensive? Overwhelmingly, it's not like they're joining the United States in a coalition of the willing to beat up on Iran, but everybody wants the straits reopen. Now, and India has managed to get one of their own tankers through in the last 24 hours on the back of an agreement between Modi and the Iranian president. Maybe we can get more support that way too. But no, I mean, the surprise here is that the United States did not have a plan for what happens if they don't have a regime they can work with, and they don't. I mean, everybody knew that the Straits of Hormuz could be made impassable by the Iranians. I mean, this is something that the CIA analysts and the Department of Defense analysts have been working through for decades. It's been scenario planned every which way. So that doesn't come as a surprise. But Trump wasn't worried about it because he said, well, after we decapitate the Iranians, they're not going to do anything. They're going to need to work with us. That turns out to not be the case at all. And so 2 weeks into this war, a war of choice, Trump's timeline, Trump's preferences, Trump's extent of targeting, you still got the straits closed with no way out. And it is urgent for Trump, who is now facing $4 gas real soon in the United States. And, fertilizer, you don't get fertilizer through. It's too late if it's after the planting season. That's going to come through food costs all over the world, grocery stores in the United States. Too late if you don't get that done urgently. So he does understand the urgency. He just doesn't have a plan for it.
And so to the point about who is in charge in Iran and how that is all working, I do want to ask you about Iran's new supreme leader. Ostensibly, we heard a purported statement from him in this last week, the first statement since he was named. But we have not seen him in public. We have not heard from him directly. What does that mean to you?
Well, we know a couple of things. He certainly doesn't have experience running the country, and they also are mostly cut off from their local commanders because the idea of military leadership having regular conversations with the commanders on the ground means that they are potentially more vulnerable to the Israelis and the Americans striking them. So right now, the decisions being made to put all of these drones in the air against all of these targets around the Gulf, those are being made locally. At the same time, it was the Iranian president who is a symbolic leader and hasn't had a lot of power, but he's the one that talked with Modi, the Indian prime minister, to essentially get a swaps deal done that got a tanker through. So it's very hard to know what, if any, authority the supreme leader has on a day-to-day basis right now. I mean, the analysts that we have that are very close to politics in Iran have no visibility on that whatsoever.
Yeah, and so it leaves that open question that you're getting at right there. What about Iran's allies in this war? China, by far the biggest buyer of Iranian oil, and U.S. intelligence suggests they're preparing to financially aid Iran as well. What about the China in all of this?
Well, the Chinese, of course, would much rather see the straits open. They have right now plenty of oil in reserves, probably for 3 months of domestic usage. So it's not urgent for them. But these prices are hurting their economy, clearly. And that will also be true for fertilizer. It's going to be true for, petrochemicals and the rest. So they want this open. That the tankers that are getting out right now are Iranian tankers. Pete Hegseth said this in his press conference yesterday morning. He said that the straits are not blocked. That is true. There are Iranian tankers getting out, and they are getting out to provide oil to China. The United States has every capacity to interdict them if they wish. They don't. They want the prices lower, just like why the U.S. is right now suspending sanctions on Russian oil. And they also don't want to antagonize the Chinese. Remember, just 6 hours ago, Trump called on the Chinese to help keep the strait open. So, and he's going to travel to China in a couple of weeks, and he's going to meet with Xi Jinping, and he wants good relations there. So he doesn't want to suddenly be responsible for shutting down oil to China. But it is all very ironic in an environment where the Americans are at war with Iran, that the Iranians are presently sending oil to China. And the Chinese, of course, are quite comfortable with that.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Ian Brimmer, great context. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.